Okay, in this video, I'm going to describe to you the process I go through when I doubt my faith. Yes, I'm a Christian. I'm actually a pastor. And yes, I do doubt my faith at times. I think doubting our faith is part of the faith. The champion of our faith, the founder of our faith, Jesus Christ, hung on a cross, was cursed by God, and he quoted Psalm 22, and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So that's part of our faith. The reason for that, I think, is because when we go through moments of doubt, it actually, ironically, increases our faith. If you read the book of Job, he says in the 15th chapter, "Though he slay me, I'll yet hope in him." When he gets to the end of doubting his faith and doubting God, everything he has is doubled, and he becomes a priest for his friends. I mean, doubt is just part of the Christian faith because it increases our faith, and faith is the most precious thing in the world to a Christian. So when I go through doubts as a Christian, as a pastor, the process I go through is kind of three stages. The first thing I think about is like, okay, I'm doubting my faith. What are the options here in terms of the origin of the universe? Like, do I believe that there's two options? Do I believe either that everything came from nothing, there was a Big Bang that wasn't caused by anything? I believe in the Big Bang. I just think God caused it. Do I think that the Big Bang was caused by nothing? There was just all the matter in the world, in the universe, was super condensed into something the size of an acorn or an atom or smaller than an atom, and then just one day it exploded. And so essentially everything exploded into being from nothing, from an atom, from something smaller than an atom. Do I believe that? Nobody caused that, just happened. Or do I believe that somebody created that super condensed mass and caused it to explode? And I'm like, it sounds more likely that someone did that than that no one did that. And the reason for that is I've seen agents, beings create stuff, but I've never seen anything create itself. So, judging by my personal experience and what science tells me, which is that things create things, and that you can't have just stuff pop into existence from nothing. Judging by my experience in science, I'm like, I think it's more likely that someone created everything than that no one created anything. This is logically how like 98% of people think in the world. Like, most people don't really believe that everything just came into existence from nothing. Smart people like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and guys like that, Sam Harris, yeah, they believe these things and they're smart, but they're a minority. They've got a little cult following of people who follow them and believe that too, but most people don't think that way because it's just illogical. So I'm like, okay, I can't get on that bandwagon. I can't believe that nothing created everything. It requires too much faith for me to believe that. So that's stage one. I'm like, okay, there's got to be someone, something, some force out there that created everything. And so the next stage I go to is like, okay, well, how am I going to identify who or what that thing is that created everything? And so here I have two options. Option one is I can go on my own spiritual journey based on experience, and I can say, based on what I feel, what I sense to be true, what I perhaps want to be true, I'm going to make that determination for myself. I'm just going to think and make the decision based on my own experience, and that's where a lot of people are. That's I think most people who believe in God are in that camp. They just say, "I'm going to determine for myself." Social scientists call this Sheilaism, named by this after this lady named Sheila. They were studying what people believe in. Sheila said, "I believe in myself. I believe in God and I believe in myself." You can call it Sheilaism, right? It's just my own thing. That's one option. I'm like, yeah, I can see that, but the problem I have with that option is that I know myself and I can really deceive myself. I've done some things in my life and I'm like, what was I thinking when I did that? And the reason I do that is because I just deceive myself. I trick myself into thinking this is a good idea and this is true. And then I do it and I'm like, yikes, that was terrible. So I'm like, I don't really trust myself for that. So I don't go that way. The other way I go is, well, I must rely on the smart people that have gone before me who have told me about these things, and not just like one guy, not just my grandpa because he's so smart, or not just some respected leader like the Pope because he's just so special, but what have what's the consensus, right? It's like when you're looking at science, it's like, yeah, there's one scientist over here that's saying whatever, and 98% of scientists over there are saying something different. I'm like, I'm gonna go with the 98% rather than this one guy over here or two guys over here. So when it comes to finding out who or what created the universe, I'm like, okay, well, what's the consensus say? What are the most credible, the smartest people say, and not just smart, but credible in the sense that their lives clearly back up their belief, right? I want to find some people that clearly believe what they're saying, right? So people who say, "Hey, I believe this and I'm willing to die for it." Right? Those type of people, martyrs of the faith. What did they believe? And so there's a lot of faiths that have a lot of martyrs, right? I'm a Christian, so a lot of Christian martyrs, but there's jihadist Islam martyrs. There's probably Mormon martyrs. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Islam's the first religion I think of, but like Tibetan monks dying for peace, pacifist martyrs. There's a bunch of different types of martyrs. So I say, okay, well, let me examine not what I feel is true, because I don't trust my feelings, but what other people have said. And so that brings me to stage three, which is okay, I have traditions to look at. I need to look at Islam. I need to look at Buddhism. I need to look at Zoroastrianism, the oldest religion, allegedly the oldest religion in human history, Christianity, obviously. I need to look at these. So when I get to stage three and I look at these traditions, not trusting myself, not trusting that everything came from nothing, but look at these traditions, Christianity every time rises to the top. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. But I think the primary reasons for it are that Christianity is one of the oldest, right? Islam, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, um, uh, aberrations of Christianity like Roman Catholicism, version, that there's a bunch of different versions of the Christian faith. I don't really want to put it that way because they're not Christian, but all of these stem from Christianity, right? So Islam, it's just some Middle Eastern guy who took the Bible and was like, yeah, we're just going to change a bunch of stuff in the Bible, like 600 years after Christ. And he's like, "Yeah, we're just gonna change it up." Same thing with Mormonism, same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses, Roman Catholicism. They say, "Oh, we're the old religion," but it's like, no, you added a bunch of stuff in after the fact. You added in the popes, you added in purgatory, you added in indulgences. You're just adding stuff in hundreds of years after the fact. So I throw all that out, and I'm like, I want to go back to the original. I want something that people have added on to. And so when I look at Christianity, it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest. Like it dates back. Whereas a lot of these other religions are just some guy clearly just woke up one day. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna change things up. I'm gonna invent a religion. Scientology, classic example. Their founder L. Ron Hubbard said, "Hey, I'm an author. I'm a science fiction author, and you don't make much money writing science fiction. The real money's in religion." And then a few years later, he comes up with a new religion. It's like, obviously, I'm not going to trust that. None of that's credible. But Christianity, the ancient form of it, the form found in the Bible, the Old and New Testament, is one of the oldest. And so I'm like, okay, that goes back further. There seems to be less of an impetus for people to create this for their own ends, right? And so I'm not just looking at people who really believe it. There's martyrs in Christianity, but martyrs in other faiths. But I'm also looking for people who are credible. Why would someone make this up? L. Ron Hubbard made up Scientology to make money. The Islam was created clearly in order to have a Middle Eastern version of Christianity that suited their ends. Like they clearly made that up. Christianity, on the other hand, started with this super long tradition in the Old Testament, and then it claimed to be the continuation of that same stream of belief in that same God that fit all the pieces together. So the odds that someone could just say, "Hey, we got this thousands-year-old stream of belief in God," the odds that they could just pick that up and continue in that same stream, um, are extremely low because they'd have to coordinate with the people who lived hundreds and thousands of years before them who were writing the Old Testament. The ability for them to collude together and say, we're going to invent this religion is really hard because it dates back into the Old Testament. Whereas Islam, it's like some guy could just wake up one day and like, guess what? I'm just going to change the Bible. L. Ron Hubbard can wake up and say, guess what? I'm going to invent a new religion. Joseph Smith could say, hey, I looked in some hat and some angel gave me gold tablets. And I'm just going to invent a new religion, right? It doesn't need to have continuity because you just can invent new stuff. But Christianity is a cohesive whole. It's 66 books in the Bible, and they all fit together, and they all written over almost 2,000 years by 40 some different authors, and they all fit together. So the ability for them to collude together would be small, and the evidence that they really believe what they taught is high because they died for it. And so Christianity, for that reason, among others, rises to the top. And so then I say, okay, well, still, um, what about Zoroastrianism? That seems to go back as far as Christianity. And I'm like, okay, well, if that religion is true, and God, the God who created everything, is the God of Zoroastrianism, he seems to not be doing a very good job because, like, no one is a Zoroastrianist. There's not many people who follow that religion. It doesn't seem to be very compelling. It doesn't seem the church, the people who believe it, haven't been really preserved. Their writings have been very poorly preserved. It doesn't seem like if God created the universe and that was his religion, he doesn't seem to care about it very much. Whereas you look at Christianity, it's like, oh, this is explosive. It's all over the world. The writings have been preserved better than any ancient writing. So the evidence that whoever created the world prefers this religion is much higher for Christianity than something like Zoroastrianism. Uh, in addition to that evidence is the fact that in Christianity you have the person of Jesus Christ who claimed to validate everything that was written about that faith and then do miracles, and then the most impressive miracle being dying and rising from the dead, and that seems to be historically verifiable. There are people who were alive at the time of Christ who saw the alive Jesus, saw the dead Jesus, and then claimed to see the alive Jesus again after he died. Whereas Zoroastrianism and other religions, they don't um, have that in quite the same historically verifiable way. So let me give you some evidence of that, right? So you think about the fact that Jesus' disciples, like they saw the alive Jesus, they saw him dead, and then they claim to see the alive Jesus. And these are historically verifiable people. Like we know they existed. So, Islam could claim, hey, I saw Muhammad work some miracles. That's fine. But did the person who claimed to see Muhammad do the miracles also die for their faith? That's what's unique about Christianity. The 12 disciples who saw the alive Jesus, claimed to see him dead, claimed to see him come back to life, historically verifiable people. According to tradition and history, as best as we can tell, almost all of them, maybe 11 out of 12, died as martyrs, right? So if anybody was going to be like, hey, this isn't true, I don't believe this, it'd be the people who are in Jesus's inner circle. So the closest witness to Jesus dying and rising are people who believed in his death and resurrection so much that they were willing to die themselves, right? And so you investigate a little bit more, you look at his death and resurrection, you see that at the tomb the first witnesses were women, right? And so if you were making up a story about this resurrected savior, you would never say it was women who first found him. Our evidence is based on the account of a woman because back then women's testimonies weren't um, permissible in court, so to speak. So, they couldn't bear witness, legally speaking. And so that's more evidence that they were writing something that's true. Like if they wanted to make it up, they would never use a woman. It'd be like us saying a 3-year-old was the evidence for Jesus. Like no one would say that because we don't believe the testimony of a 3-year-old. So like you see this evidence stack up, like it seems like what they're writing is true. The people who were there, they seem to believe it. The evidence in the writings is that they weren't lying about it. And so Christianity, as you examine it, arises to the top, and then you compare the evidence for Christianity. It's not open and shut, right? There's still room for doubt there. There's still things like it seems like this is contradicting that, and you still see some issues there that you have to work through. But you look at Christianity, and then you compare its evidence to Islam, Buddhism, all these other religions, Zoroastrianism. It's like, well, these pale in comparison. So that doesn't mean, again, that Christianity is like, oh yeah, I have no doubts about this, but it does mean this is my best option. And so when you plug that third one, right? All the religions, Christianity is the best. With the second thing, which is I'm not going to trust myself, I'm going to see what credible people before me have said. With the first thing, that is, I don't have enough faith to believe this all came from nowhere. You plug those three things together, and it's like, well, Christianity is my best bet. Now, that's all logical and rational. And so that brings me to a point personally where I'm like, this is what I'm going to believe. But it doesn't bring me to the point where it's like, I'm going to die for this. Because it's like, I still have doubts about stuff. I'm still don't know why the Bible was written this way. I still don't know why some of the gospel accounts seem to have difficulties or contradictions with one another. And so it's enough to get me, I guess you could put it, into the church door, but I still need to pray and get on my knees and ask for the Holy Spirit to grant me faith. So that's kind of the dance I do personally. My faith comes ultimately from the Holy Spirit, but as I'm doubting, those are the three steps I go through in order to remind me of the fact that I think Christianity is, logically, rationally speaking, the most rational thing to believe in. Just remember those three steps. Did everything come from nothing? Am I going to believe myself or believe what smart people said? And what's the most likely religion, rationally speaking, to be true? God bless.